But now to Werner. It's about internationalization.
Yes, yes, it
A
is. It is
very
a very
European
international talk.
Yeah, it's a very European topic. I think then people from New Zealand don't have this problem so often. But we have many people here which have this problem. So have fun. The stage is yours.
Okay, thank you, Andy. So my talk is about internationalization and Fluent, how to create multilingual sites in Silverstripe. And we're getting full screen. So who am I? Who am I to hold this talk? My name is Werner Krauß. I'm originally from my Nether Bavarian home country, Lower Bavaria. And I'm also internationalized because I moved to Austria and now I'm living in Bad Ischl in the wonderful region of the Salzkammergut. You might know me as WMK on Slack, and I'm coding since 1998. I'm a freelancer since 2006 and working with Silverstripe for many years now. I also created a blog about Silverstripe, and I'm one of the 4 co-founders of S2 Hub. So what's this talk about? First, we go through all this theory, the definition of internationalization. Then we look what tools do we have to make a Silverstripe website translated, multilingual. And yeah, at the end, some tips, tricks, gotchas, whatever. So maybe you have seen this abbreviation i18n. What's this all about? Is it about me or what is it? No, i18n is the abbreviation of internationalization. So it's I, 18 characters in between, and the last one, the N. And internationalization means to make a software, to design a software that way that it can be adapted to other languages without changing the actual code of the software. And localization, this L10N, is then after that the process of adding new locales, of adding new translations to that software. And yeah, now we are here. What's a language? What's a locale? A language is that what we all speak, but depending on the region where we live, we have different locales. So where I come from Germany, we speak a little bit different kind of German than where I live now in Austria. And that's also the system with the locales on the computer. So we have at least 3 locales for Germany, for German language. It's Germany, so this DE_DE. It's the Austrian German, DE_AT, and the Switzerland German, DE_CH. And one famous example is the name of the first month of the year, of January. In Germany, we say Januar, and in Austria, they say Jänner. There's also a locale for international English, because English is spoken all around the world, but which kind of English should I actually choose for my website when I wanted to address to international guests, like we have here in the Salzkammergut in the tourist region? So, and this code is EN_100. It's the only code without an actual region code. So the 100 is for the whole world. And you find more information about this, of course, on Wikipedia. So when you want to make your software or your website international, what are all topics you have to think about? So the first topic is text, content. Of course, the static text in your templates like buttons, labels, any other content there, and then the dynamic content. Also the character sets, which became very easy now with UTF-8 But I remember times when it was really difficult to switch from German from this Central European character set to an East European character set. And maybe you would have to deal with left to right versus right to left languages. Like the Arabic languages, they're written right to left. Pluralization might be different in other locales, and so are date and time formats, calendar systems, time zones, like on the Silverstripe, Stripecon website. Number formats, what's the delimiter between the number and the decimal? Currencies, how are those written? Is the currency symbol in front or after the number? Punctuation, quotes, and so on, and also SEO stuff. So you should take the content locale in the HTML tag. So what steps do we need to make software multilingual? The first step is, of course, internationalization. So change the software that it can translate the strings, that there is some kind of translation system in there. The next step is localization, the actual process of translating these strings that can be translated. And the last step is quality assurance, so that the translations are okay for the end users, for their culture. So on our project, Hallstatt.net, a big touristic platform for the inner Salzkammergut region and the World Heritage town of Hallstatt, our translator always wants to translate for the international audience and not only for the native speakers, because some tourists from other regions of Europe or Asia might not speak English so good that they understand English for native speakers. So we need some kind of simpler English translation for this end users, for this personas. So the next topic is internationalization and Silverstripe. What does Silverstripe have to, what kind of tools does Silverstripe have for us to make our websites international? The first tool is the i18n class. It's the home of the _t function we can use for static translations. We can have dynamic translations, so translations in the database. And we also have pretty good documentation about this internationalization process in Silverstripe. So the class i18n stores the current locale and the date and time formats, and it contains this _t method for translating the static properties we use all the time for translating this. We also have an interface for our own classes to provide strings that should be translated, so that we don't have to provide them in _t methods, but we can just return an array with the keys and the basic translation for it. It's mainly used by the data object, and it can be overwritten in subclasses when you want to add additional things, additional keys. So what's actually the process of translating static content? Most of us know the _t method, and it's like this. It's _t. We have the key. We have a class name, then the dot, and then the actual translation key. And we must provide a fallback translation that is used when there is no translation in the target locale available. And in our code, this might look like this. So _t, the entity is grid field bulk manager. The key is select all label. And the actual fallback translation, or the actual English translation, is select all. And in our German translation, which is done in YAML files, we see here DE for German, grid field bulk manager is the same string like we have here for the class, and here is select all label, and here is the German translation, alle auswählen. We can also pass parameters to the _t method, because it's when we want something like this number of this class are saved successfully, it might be possible that in other translations this count and class is not at the beginning of the translated string, but in the middle or at the end or whatever. And therefore, we have simple string replacement methods like this. So we have here count class are saved successfully, and then we pass an array. The key is the same like in our translation string, and the value is the actual value that can be included here. We can, of course, translate stuff in our templates. Then we have this kind of syntax in the template, similar to the loop and with syntax, and then it looks like this here. So we have here the module or the class and the key, and here we provide the default translation. I always try to use English labels in my templates, even when it's a German homepage or a German module, because when I extract it later on, it's easier for me. So the English language is the source language for my for all my localized projects. And it's also possible to pass parameters like here, specification for model, and the model name is then included from the template data. Okay, the next one. Where are the translations actually stored? They are stored in the lang directory in our modules or in our app. And there we have one YAML file for each locale or for each language. So when we just have, for instance, de.yaml, that's for the German language, and it works for all locales. But when we need to override something, because on the Austrian locale, we need some of these strings differently, then we can add on de_at YAML, and those overrule the general German language strings then. As you've seen before, the provide i18n entities method provides some standard translations for data objects, and we don't have to do this in our code ourselves. And here you see actually from James' photo gallery image extension, this standard stuff. So the singular name and the plural name can be here translated, and also the plurals. So for one image, we have the translation ein Bild, one image, and for more than one images, we have the number of image Bilder, so the number of images. And we also have some shortcodes when we want to translate the field labels. So when we have, for instance, the address data object from Silvershop, there we have a DB field called phone and one postal code and so on. And we could either write a field labels method in the address and try to give our own translation strings for that to have them translated, or we can just use the pretty undocumented fallback that's in data object field labels, and we can prefix it with db underscore. And here you see the phone db field with db underscore phone is translated as Telefonnummer. The db underscore postal code is translated as Postleitzahl, and so on. And then we see it automatically in the backend translated to German when we need a German backend, or when we have the address form in the front end, we can also use just the field label for this field. It also works for has one, for has many, for many, for belongs many, but unfortunately it doesn't work with belongs to. I don't know why, but it's not in the code in this field labels method. So when we add all this translation strings in our code and in our templates, we somehow have to add them to the to our main source language files, to our en.yaml, and this can either be done manually, or when you don't have time to do it manually, there is a task for it, the i18n text collector task. And this text collector task collects all these translation strings from your PHP code and from your templates in your modules, but unfortunately not in the themes. This worked back in the days of Silverstripe 3, but it doesn't work in Silverstripe 4. It's a little bit, not so good. But you can collect the other stuff on your development machine, best on your development environment, because it needs PHP unit installed to analyze the PHP code. And then you can run it like every other dev task, either from your web browser or from your CLI. And now that you know that all these translated strings are just translated in YAML files, I can show you how to fix missing strings from a module in your own project without forking the module, because it's just a string in a YAML file. And when you add a configuration, or when you add a language string in your own app directory, it overrules the language string from the modules. And this way you can either overrule a language string, or you can add a missing language string in your code without actually changing the module. So you need to find the missing string somehow in the templates or in the code. And when you know the key, you can just add it to your own language file, then flush. So Silverstripe knows the new translation strings and flashes its cache, and you are done. Yeah, but when you are done and you translated it for yourself, please make a pull request and give it back to the community so others also can use this. Thank you. So, how can you actually translate core modules or help translating other modules? Most modules and all core modules use an external tool called Transifex. It's available on transifex.com, and it's a really great tool to keep translations in sync with multiple languages. It has CLI tools for uploading the source language strings and for downloading all the translations before you make a new tag release. But when you're using Transifex, you have to do everything with Transifex. So any pull requests you get in that are modifying the language files directly, they don't really work because Transifex would overrule or overwrite this stuff. So never change this local stuff in your repositories directly. Transifex looks like this. So you have a list of all strings, you have a list of untranslated strings, and here you see the untranslated strings. Here you can actually translate your content. Here you see which string is this, because this is the unsafe translation, or this is the original string, but where does this come from? And here you see it comes from the CMS page history controller comparing version. So that's the actual YAML key for your translation. And you know it's in the history controller and for the label comparing version. And then you can know how is it used. Another cool tool, or very cool and handy feature of Transifex, is that it can suggest translations, because something similar was translated somewhere else, or actually this string was translated somewhere else before and it moved to another controller, therefore the translation string changed, and so on. And in this case, we have a 100% match, and you can just click on use this and you're done. So that's very, very nice. That's very nice, yeah. So let's have a look at Transifex. Where is it? Where is my Transifex window? Nope. It's not here. Here is it. Wonderful. So that's actually Transifex live, and you have different organizations. Each vendor has his own organization, like Silvershop or Columbia, or even I have some of my older modules on Transifex. Here you can see the different modules. And there you see Elemental has actually 27 languages. Finnish is totally translated 100%. And German has 2 strings to translate. And then I can either view the resources. So I see we have 2 resources in their JavaScript translations and the normal PHP YAML translations. And then I can go into translate and see what strings are actually to translate, which strings are not translated yet. And here we see 2 strings are untranslated. And it's displayed and not displayed. Well, So here are the 2 untranslated strings displayed. And now I could translate it manually, or I could look at the suggestions part of this page, and I see we already had a string called displayed, and someone translated it already 3 years ago. And I can go to use this and save the translation. And I can also do it for not displayed. And then we have, well, not really, wird angezeigt. Then I can type in wird nicht angezeigt and save this translation, and we are done. Wonderful, isn't it? So again, and JavaScript, what's with JavaScript? Can we translate it? Yes, of course. We also can translate JavaScript strings, and Silverstripe has something similar to the _t function in PHP for JavaScript. So we have to include some requirements and the actual language JavaScript files, the dictionaries, and the dictionaries are JavaScript objects with keys and values. And yeah, it's pretty similar to the _t method. So now we are done with static translations. Now, how can we translate dynamic content? How can we translate things that live in the database? For this, in Silverstripe 4, we have the Fluent module, and we can install it using Composer, make a dev build that the database tables are actually generated. And you have to configure which locales do you actually want to translate to. Pages are automatically translated, or you don't have to do anything. You don't have to configure anything to translate pages. Actually, you have to go through your pages and translate them and publish them again to have them translated. Or it's best to add Fluent at the very beginning of your project, then wipe the database or all these pages and insert your actual content. You can configure the locales in the backend, but I'm more a configuration YAML guy, and I want my stuff configured. Most of my stuff I just want to have in my Git repository and configured there, because I develop the pages, the sites locally with any dummy data. Then I want to wipe the database or install it newly on my server. And then I want all those locales automatically configured, and I don't want to type them in again on the server. But you can do this in a moment. I show you how. For each locale, you can have either a separate domain or a unique URL segment. And it's also possible to have fallback locales. Yeah. Once we had a project for a pharma company who sells stuff to Germany, to Austria, and to Switzerland, and all these products have the same content, but on some pages with legal texts, they needed slightly different texts, and then we added different locales, and we used a fallback system so that the product, we have one product in there and one translation for the product for all German areas, but on these pages with the legal texts or where they need some slightly different content, like on the contact page, maybe different addresses there, then we had it translated to each locale separately. Yeah. So, and this is how it looks like, where you configure the locales in the backend. So you can select a locale from a dropdown. You can give it a title. You can configure the URL segment. You can say, is this the global default locale? And yeah, you can add a domain to it. And when you want to have them installed, when you make your first dev build on your server, you can use the default records for this. And this is actually what I use often. So this is just the local data object, default records, and I have the German locale and the English locale, and so on, whatever I need. Translating pages is done in the CMS, of course. You get a nice badge to see which locale you are on. And here you see this badge means this field can be translated. And on the page, you have the main content tab and the localization tab. And there you see the different states of your available locales. And in this case, you see the German page is already published and it's live. And the English page is already localized, but it's not published. And the Austrian page is not localized at all. But when we have German as fallback, everything is okay. And here you see a nice user interface. When you have created your page, you created all your elements, and on the source page, on your very first source page, you can copy this content with all the elements to the other translations, and then you can just change the texts in the translations. But when you have an image text content block, the image will be there. And you can copy the locales not only in the localization tab, like you've seen before. There are also some copy actions beneath the save and publish buttons at the bottom of your page. And there you can copy to all other locales, or you can clear all other locales, and so on. When you want to translate data objects, you need to tell the data object that it should be translated. Well, okay, that should be clear. But how can you tell it the data object? Well, with Fluent, you just throw an extension on it, and then it can be translated. And these extensions are the Fluent extension for normal unversioned data objects, and the Fluent versioned extension for versioned data objects. And this extension translates all translatable fields automatically. So that are text fields like varchar or HTML text. Or when you don't want to translate all the fields, you can configure them like here in the translate configuration. So for my model that has a name, an address, and the actual town, I only wanted to translate the name and the address and the town, but not the street address. And then it looks in the backend like this. So for the German translation, we have the name like Firma Fu, the address is irgendwo something, and the town is the German name for Köln. And in the English, we say Company Fu, not Firma, but company. And we also translate the town to Cologne. Yeah. And I actually had the problem on a page years ago where a manufacturer had a list of all of the dealers where you can buy his products. And then he called me, hey, on the German page, the town of Cologne is not translated into Cologne. On the English page, there is still Köln and not Cologne. So yeah, make sure to translate stuff like that. When you want to add form fields to your data objects, then you need to use a little trick. Then you need to add these form fields in before update CMS fields when you're actually calling parent get CMS fields. Why is that? Well, the Fluent extension adds all these badges and makes your fields translatable in the on update CMS fields hook. And this is run in parent get CMS fields actually. So after that, all the translated fields are already translated that are there, and your field is not translated afterwards. If you add your code like this in the before update CMS fields method, then this fields can be translated. If you don't call parent get CMS fields, you don't need to use the before update CMS fields method. You can also translate relations and relationships. For this, you need the Fluent filtered extension. And then if you have this, you can choose in the backend in which locales should this object actually be shown. It only filters in the front end automatically, not in the backend. There it is disabled, so you can choose from all of the objects. Fluent also ships with a locale menu you can use as a language switcher. And well, it's easy like that. It's include this template, local menu. And what does the local menu do? Well, it actually loops over all the available locales and puts out a link to this locale. Pretty straightforward. And you can modify this template in your own theme and style it like you want. Another thing with Fluent is Fluent State. It's actually your friend when you want to deal with localized content programmatically. So when you write a task that does some translation stuff and should save stuff in another locale or should read stuff from another locale, then you need Fluent State. The state contains all the useful information, the current locale, the current domain, if you're actually in domain mode, and if you are in front end or if you are in the back end. And the method with state changes the current locale for this request. And then you can maybe, like here in this example, we want to export products in different locales at once. And in the backend, we are on our default locale, but we need other locales to export. And then we need call Fluent State, set locale, we set the locale, and then with state, we then have this locale. And then we can just return the product in another locale than our current locale. And then we get a data list with all the Dutch products or with all the British products, even when our default locale is German or Austrian or, well, what else? So, so I hope you're still with me. And so we go to the next section, which is tips and tricks and other stuff. One thing I have to talk about is locales versus countries. On very simple websites, you can use the local switcher also as a country switcher, but that doesn't work everywhere because a country can have more locales or more languages. So just look at the Switzerland. They have 3 official languages. Or yesterday we heard in Finland, they have 2 official languages. The same is in Canada. And when you are in New Zealand, you have English and Maori. So there are different regions and different locales in these countries. And also a language can be spoken in more countries. So when you have to switch between German Germany or German Austria, then the locales don't match with the countries. And this is a locale or country switcher menu we made for another project. And here you see you have 3 times Deutsch. And for the Switzerland, we had 2 locales for 1 country. So it doesn't really match. Some gotchas with Fluent is you have to tell the partial cache on which locale you are. And I think it was twice that my colleague called me and said, hey, on the German page, we have the English menu or vice versa. And well, here you just have to add the current locale string to your cache key. And one thing before we stop, useful extensions and ideas. So when I made my last project, I had a big language menu, and I wondered why can't I just move the languages around? I don't want them in the order from the database. I want to sort them myself. And then I found this neat module. It's from Der Ralf. It's Silverstripe Fluent tweaks. And it just adds some very simple but very useful stuff to Fluent. So you can order and sort the locales. You can hide them from the local menu, and you can also hide them from the meta tags. So when you are working on an unpublished locale on a live site, yeah, that's pretty handy. There's also an improved text collector task from Le Koala, which also has the ability to send untranslated strings to Google Translate. And our friends from level 51 from my Lower Bavarian home country, Lower Bavaria, have a module for auto-translate. So you can automatically translate in the backend with the Google Translate API. And when I discussed with some colleagues about this talk, one said, well, ain't there a module or a task to export all the content to any format that I could give to my translator, because he wants it somehow digitally on paper or whatever. And I didn't find a ready-to-use module, something abandoned from the old Silverstripe 3 eras. But yeah, that would be a good idea to loop over all the pages or some data objects or whatever and put out this content. So actually, that is it. Thank you very much. And yeah, I hope you learned something about internationalization and multilingual websites there. Okay.
Is it schwarz?
It's schwarz, yeah. It's black.
One moment, we just had a crash because of the stormy weather.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And you painted it black. So I can see you again.
A light of fell off. So, thank you very much, Werner.
You're welcome.
Very good talk about internationalization. Are there any questions? I don't think so.
Okay.
So it's very good to know that internationalization has different aspects, and I think you spoke about all of them. Mm-hmm. There's a question from Giancarlo.
How does Google Auto-Translate work? Well, I did not work with it myself, but I helped on a project where my colleague implemented it. And it's basically, you have an API, you send the string to translate over it, and you tell Google which locale your string has, and then it returns the translate string. And after that, you can save this string where you want. Yeah, that's it. And I guess in this project, yes, they saved it for first, and then some editor went over it and maybe corrected it.
Okay. Thank you. I think then we're ending the talk just now. If you have a joke, then everyone would be happy. But
yeah, not yet, no.
Okay.
Yeah, Herbert has a question.
Yes. But he's expected to go to the backstage.
Oh,
he's not on the backstage.
Have you worked with Fluent and Headless? Are there any issues or gotchas? Actually, no, I haven't worked with it. But yeah, it's actually data you can extract somehow via GraphQL, and then in your front end stack you have to manage these translations. Yeah. And I think this was also a question yesterday we asked to Aaron, what's about Fluent or translating content in this headless approach with Next.js.
Yeah.
Have you used Fluent and Next.js, Andy?
No, I don't think so.